So when you get into this whole discussion about Israel in the church, there's one chapter that everyone points to as, well, the chapter that's supposed to settle it, Romans 11. The central question it asks is a big one, with absolutely massive implications. So let's just dive right in.
What's so amazing about this chapter is just how direct it is. The Apostle Paul doesn't dance around the issue or drop subtle hints. After spending 2 chapters laying out Israel's stumble, he just confronts the most logical and difficult question head-on. And there it is. That's the question that this whole thing hangs on. Because of Israel's widespread rejection of their own Messiah, has God just canceled his promises and permanently cast them off? Paul puts that question right on the table for everyone to see.
And his answer is immediate and absolute. In the original Greek, this is the strongest possible negative you can use. It's not a probably not or, well, it's complicated. It is an emphatic, unconditional, absolutely not. This sets the tone for everything that follows. The point is clear. God is not finished with Israel.
Okay, so how does Paul explain this? Well, he starts by being completely honest. He doesn't downplay it, he acknowledges the reality of the situation. Israel's rejection of their Messiah is a real, tragic fact of history. But, and this is so crucial, their rejection is not total. To make his point, Paul draws this brilliant parallel to a super famous moment in Israel's past. Remember the prophet Elijah? He was just in total despair, thinking he was the only faithful guy left in the entire nation. But God corrected him, telling him, nope, I've kept for myself a core of 7,000 who haven't abandoned me. Paul says that exact same principle is at work right now.
He brings that old story right into his present day. He says, so too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. What he's saying is that even in the middle of all this national unbelief, God has kept a faithful core. So yeah, the rejection is real, but it's not total, and as we're about to see, it's definitely not final. From there, Paul kind of zooms out and reveals what he calls a mystery, which is basically God's incredible 3-stage plan for history that actually incorporates Israel's temporary stumble. This wasn't some mistake or a plan B, it's all part of a much bigger story of redemption.
So here's the flow. First, a partial and temporary hardening comes over Israel. Then, because of their unbelief, salvation goes out to the Gentiles. The nations flood in. That's the age we're living in right now. But, and this is key, it doesn't stop there. The final stage is the return of Israel, when those natural branches get grafted back in.
Paul uses this really powerful metaphor of an olive tree to explain it all. The root, that's God's covenant promises made to Israel. The natural branches are ethnic Israel. And the wild branches, well, that's the Gentiles, people like me, who have been grafted in. And this is such a brilliant picture because it comes with a warning. Gentile believers should not get arrogant, thinking they've replaced the original branches. Because if God could break off the natural branches for unbelief, he can definitely do the same to the wild ones.
Okay, all of this builds to the really stunning conclusion of this mystery. Paul is bringing his whole argument about the hardening, the Gentiles coming in, and the regrafting to a super clear and powerful climax.
And here it is. He says a partial hardening has come on Israel, but only until a specific point in time, when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And after that point, something absolutely incredible happens. All Israel will be saved. This is pointing to a future national turning of Israel back to their Messiah. So the crucial question is, who is all Israel? I mean, think about it. For 3 solid chapters, Paul has been talking meticulously about ethnic, national Israel, their history, their stumble, their future. It would make 0 sense for him to suddenly, in his final punchline, change the definition of Israel to mean the church. The context is crystal clear. All Israel refers to the same national group he's been talking about all along. But why is this future restoration guaranteed? Paul doesn't just leave us hanging. He grounds this future hope in the very character and faithfulness of God himself. This is the theological bedrock of the entire argument. Paul then explains Israel's kind of fascinating dual status. He says, right now, when it comes to the gospel, their rejection makes them enemies. But this actually served a purpose. It opened the door of salvation to the Gentiles. It was for your sake. But when it comes to God's original election, his promises, they are still beloved because of the unbreakable promises he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then comes the line that just demolishes the whole idea of a permanent replacement. Why are they still beloved? For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. This right here is the anchor.
The promises God made to Israel, his calling on them as a nation, they can't be taken back.
Let's be perfectly clear on what irrevocable means. It doesn't mean can be reinterpreted later or spiritualized away. It means it cannot be canceled. It is permanent. God literally tied his own reputation to these specific promises, and his word doesn't change.
And this is why this whole thing matters so much, not just for Israel, but for every single one of us. Because if God's promises, which he went out of his way to call irrevocable, can just be canceled for Israel, then what does that say about the security of the promises he's made to us in the church? The faithfulness of God isn't something you can slice up. It's a single, indivisible thing.
Now at this point, you might be thinking of a whole other set of verses, and this leads us right into the most common counter-argument to this view, and it's what we absolutely have to tackle next. And it's a really good question. You have passages in Ephesians and Galatians that talk about breaking down the dividing wall and creating one new man. So does this unity in Christ completely erase the national distinctions and promises that Paul just so carefully laid out in Romans 11? Or is there a way to hold both of these truths together? That's the question we're going to dig into in our next explainer.